The conference room on the 38th floor had a glass wall that looked straight down into the atrium, and I remember thinking how clean everything looked. The white marble, the orchids by the elevators, the 8 people seated around a table that cost more than my first car. Dorian smiled at me the way you smile at someone you've already decided no longer matters. "Lyssandra," he said, folding his hands. "The committee took a vote this morning. You're being released from your seat. It's nothing personal. The fund is just moving in a sharper direction." 8 heads nodded along the table. Not one of them looked at me directly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't reach for my notes. I simply let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable for everyone but me. Because Dorian had made one mistake. He'd never actually read the document that built this entire fund, and I had written it. I keep a single sheet of paper in the inside pocket of every blazer I own. It is folded into quarters, soft at the creases from years of handling, and most days I forget it is there at all. That morning, riding the elevator up to the 38th floor of Castellane Verge Partners, I felt it against my chest like a second heartbeat. I am Lyssandra Marchetti. For 9 years, I have been a general partner at one of the most disciplined mid-market venture funds in the country, and for 9 years, I have been the person nobody photographed at the conferences. I am not the face. Dorian Halloway is the face. Silver-templed, easy in front of a camera, the kind of man who can make a room of limited partners feel like they are being let in on a secret. I am the one who reads the secret first and decides whether it is worth telling. When Castellane Verge was founded, there were 3 of us: Dorian, our late founder Aurelio Castellane, and me. Dorian raised the money. Aurelio gave us the name and the credibility. And I built the architecture, the legal skeleton, the governance, the fund mechanics that turned good intentions into a machine that could actually deploy $400 million without tearing itself apart. I drafted the limited partnership agreement. I sat across the table from the lawyers at 2 p.m. and again at midnight, line by line, clause by clause, until the document said exactly what I meant it to say. People remember the deals. They never remember who wrote the rules of the game. Aurelio died 18 months ago. A heart attack in his garden, the way decent men sometimes go. Quietly, mid-sentence, watering something. After the funeral, Dorian wore his grief like a tailored coat for exactly 2 weeks, and then he began, very gently, to redecorate. First, it was the language. We stopped calling ourselves a partnership in his emails and started calling ourselves the platform. Then it was the seating. The investment committee, which had always been a round table of equals, acquired a clear head, Dorian's chair, slightly larger, positioned where the light fell best. Then it was the deals themselves. The careful, patient bets Aurelio and I had favored gave way to louder, faster plays. Companies with thin fundamentals and thick press coverage. Dorian liked things that photographed well. I watched it happen the way you watch a tide come in. You can stand on the sand and tell yourself the water is not really getting closer, right up until it is around your ankles. The first time he tried to move past me directly was a Tuesday in October. We had a portfolio company, a logistics software outfit called Brindle Stack, that had received an acquisition offer. $94 million, all cash, from a strategic buyer. On paper, it looked like a clean win. But I had spent 2 weeks inside their data room, and I knew what Dorian did not bother to know. The buyer's financing was soft, the earn-out structure was a trap, and our limited partners would see a fraction of the headline number after the dust settled. Worse, the deal would lock us out of a far better exit that was 8 months from materializing. I said no, not loudly. I just laid the analysis on the table in our Thursday committee meeting and walked them through it, page by page, until the room went quiet. Dorian's jaw had tightened in a way I had learned to read. He did not like being told that the shiny thing was rotten underneath. He liked it even less when I was right, which I usually was, because I did the reading. "We'll revisit it," he had said that day, smiling at the room. "Lyssandra is always so thorough." He made the word sound like an apology. After that meeting, I noticed the small things accumulating. My name dropped off 2 distribution lists. A junior partner who used to forward me deal memos stopped. The associates began rooting questions around me to a man named Caspian Vance, a new principal Dorian had brought in from a bank, all confidence and no scar tissue, the kind of person who believed venture capital was a personality rather than a discipline. One evening, working late, I passed Dorian's office. The door was open a few inches. I heard Caspian's voice, low and amused. "She's basically a glorified compliance officer at this point," he was saying. "Aurelio's leftover furniture." And Dorian's reply, warm, almost fond. "She'll come around, or she won't. Either way, it sorts itself out by year end." I did not stop walking. I did not let my heels change rhythm on the marble. I rode the elevator down 38 floors, with my reflection multiplied in the dark glass, and I thought about the sheet of paper folded in my pocket. Leftover furniture, glorified compliance. They had spent 18 months looking at me and seeing a relic of a dead man's fund. What none of them had done, not Dorian, not Caspian, not the 8 partners who would eventually nod along to my removal, was open the founding agreement and read what it actually said about the power that was supposedly being taken away from me. That was the thing about Dorian. He had always trusted the headline number and skipped the footnotes. And I lived in the footnotes. The All Partners Offsite came in November, 2 days at a coastal hotel that Dorian had chosen for the photographs, as much as the agenda. I understood the choreography the moment I walked into the main conference suite and saw the seating cards. Mine was at the far end of the table, past the principals, past Caspian, in the spot you give to someone whose attendance is a courtesy rather than a requirement. I sat where they put me. There is a particular kind of patience you learn when you are the only woman in rooms like these for 9 years. You learn that the seat does not determine the outcome. The document does. The first morning was theater. Dorian presented the platform's next chapter with a slide deck that used the word momentum 11 times. He talked about decisiveness, about cutting through the caution that had held the fund back, about a leaner committee that could move at the speed of the market. Every person in the room knew the speech was about me. Nobody said my name. That was the cruelty of it. They discussed the removal of my authority for 40 minutes without once looking down the table to where I sat. Caspian presented after lunch. He pitched a new framework for investment velocity, which as far as I could tell meant doing less reading and more believing. At one point, he put up a slide that said the old guard mistakes diligence for value, and a few people chuckled, and he glanced at me with the satisfaction of a man who thinks he has just landed something. "No offense to the traditionalists," he said, smiling. "None taken," I said. It was the only thing I said all afternoon. The real moment came the second morning. Dorian called the formal session to order with the particular warmth of a man who has already counted his votes. He had a single agenda item printed on heavy cream paper, the way he liked things. Governance, modernization. Underneath it, in smaller type, restructuring of the investment committee. He spoke for a while about evolution, about how every great institution must shed its early scaffolding to grow. Then he arrived at the sentence he had clearly rehearsed in the mirror. As part of streamlining our committee, we'll be releasing Lyssandra from her seat, effective today. We're deeply grateful for her foundational contributions. He let the word foundational hang there like a wreath on a door. But the fund needs to move faster than consensus allows. He turned to the table. All in favor? It was not really a question. 8 hands. Caspian's first, of course, lifted high enough to be sure it counted twice if it could. The others followed in a soft cascade, the way people sign a card for a colleague they barely know. A partner named Idris, who had once called me at midnight in a panic over a term sheet and whom I had talked off a ledge for 2 hours, raised his hand and studied the grain of the table. Opposed? Dorian asked, looking at me with something that wanted to be sympathy. I did not raise my hand. I did not say anything. I folded my own hands on the table and let the vote pass cleanly, completely, with full ceremony, because a thing has more force when it is finished than when it is merely attempted. Then it settled, Dorian said, and I watched the relief move through his shoulders. He thought the hardest part was over. He thought he had just done the difficult, necessary work of a leader. It's settled, I agreed. He blinked. He had expected an argument, tears, or fury, or at least the brittle dignity of a person clinging to a title. My calm unsettled him more than shouting would have. Caspian leaned back in his chair with a small private smile, already mentally redecorating my office. Lyssandra, Dorian said, recovering his smoothness. You can take the rest of the week. HR will handle the seat transition and your partnership wind down. There's no need to. Before I go, I said. The room stilled. 8 people who had just voted me into irrelevance suddenly remembered I was a person who could speak. I reached into the inside pocket of my blazer and took out the single sheet of paper, soft at the creases, and unfolded it slowly on the table in front of me. I smoothed it flat with 2 fingers. It was a photocopy. 1 page lifted from a document several hundred pages long, a document every one of them had signed without reading, the way you sign for a package. There's a small matter of the agreement, I said, the one that actually governs this fund. I'd like to read you 1 section before you finalize anything. Dorian's smile did not move, but something behind his eyes did. Lyssandra, this is hardly the... Section 4, I said, and looked up at him. I think you should hear it. I wrote it. Before I read them that section, and trust me, you're going to want to hear every word of it. Let me ask you something. Have you ever sat in a room full of people who'd already decided you were finished and felt the strange, quiet power of knowing something they didn't? If you have, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one, and these stories are the reason I keep telling these stories. And if you're the kind of person who believes patience beats noise, do me a small favor and subscribe. There are people in this fund who are about to learn that lesson the hard way, now. Let me tell you exactly what was written on that page. Section 4, I said again, and began to read. My voice was even. I had read this clause aloud to a room of lawyers 9 years earlier, late on a night when Aurelio was still alive and still believed, as I did, that a fund should be built to survive its own founders. The words had not changed. Only the people listening had. No exit, liquidation, distribution, or transfer of a portfolio position exceeding $50 million shall be executed without the unanimous written consent of the founding partners then serving in a governance capacity. I looked up. There were 3 founding partners. Aurelio is gone. Dorian, you remain. And I remain. You've just been removed, Caspian said, too quickly, the way people speak when they sense the floor moving and want to nail it back down. You're not on the committee. The clause doesn't say committee, I said. It says founding partners serving in a governance capacity. I am still a partner of this fund. You voted me off a committee. You did not. You cannot. Vote me out of the partnership. Those are two different documents, and you only amended one of them, the smaller one. The room had gone very quiet, the kind of quiet that has texture. I let it sit. Then I added the part that mattered. There is a unanimous consent threshold on any exit over 50 million. Brindlestack is at 94. The deal you've been quietly pushing towards signing this week, Dorian, the one the strategic buyer expects to close Friday, requires my signature, and I haven't given it. I won't. I watched it land, not all at once. Dorian was too practiced to flinch in front of the partners, but I had spent 9 years across the table from this man, and I knew his tells the way a sailor knows weather. The small muscle at the corner of his jaw, the way his thumb pressed flat against the cream-colored agenda paper as if he could hold the morning in place by sheer pressure. That clause is decades of fund governance ago, he said. It's vestigial. Nobody's enforced it. Nobody's needed to, I said. It was a safeguard against exactly this, a fund being steered toward a bad exit by one person who likes the headline. It has never been triggered because, until now, I have never disagreed with an exit strongly enough to use it. You're confusing dormant with dead? They are not the same thing. Caspian was scrolling on his phone now, frantically, presumably pulling up the LPA, presumably reaching the section I had just read and discovering it was exactly as I had described. His face did the thing faces do when the ground gives way, a stillness, then a small collapse. It's in here, he said quietly to Dorian, not meaning to say it out loud. I almost felt for him. He was young. He had believed the org chart was the truth. He was about to learn that the org chart is just the story a company tells about itself, and that underneath it there is always a colder, older document that means what it says. I want you to understand how I built this, not in a single clever stroke. That is how it happens in stories, but it is not how it happens in life. I built it the way you build anything that lasts. Slowly, when no one was watching, by caring about the boring parts. 9 years ago, on the night we finalized the agreement, the lawyers wanted to strike the unanimous consent clause. Too rigid, they said. It will tie your hands in a fast market. Aurelio had wavered, and I had said no, keep it. Because a fund is a body of other people's money, and money attracts exactly the kind of charming, decisive person who should never be allowed to move alone. I did not write that clause to protect myself. I wrote it to protect the limited partners from a future version of leadership that loved momentum more than truth. I just hadn't known then that the future version would be sitting 4 seats down from me, wearing a watch worth more than an associate's salary, calling me leftover furniture. Over the years, I had done the unglamorous maintenance. Every time we onboarded a new partner, I made sure they signed the full LPA, not a summary. Every time Dorian tried to simplify our governance docs, I let him simplify the committee charter, the small one, the one he cared about, while quietly preserving the partnership agreement underneath. He thought he was streamlining. He was sanding the paint off a vault and leaving the steel. And the Brindlestack deal, the 94 million he was so eager to sign, I had been watching that one for months. I knew the better exit was coming. I knew the strategic buyer's financing was held together with optimism. I had not blocked it loudly, because a block you announce is a block they can route around. I had simply made sure that when the moment came, my signature would be the one thing standing between Dorian and the deal he wanted to be remembered for. "Call the buyer's counsel if you'd like," I said. "Ask them whether a founding partner's withheld consent voids the closing conditions. I already know the answer. I wrote those closing conditions too." Dorian set down his pen. He looked, for the first time in 18 months, like a man who had just understood that the building he was redecorating belonged to someone else. Somewhere down the table, Idris, the one who had studied the grain of the wood while voting against me, let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. Dorian asked everyone else to leave the room. He did it smoothly, the way he did everything, a hand spread on the table, a warm, "Give us a few minutes, will you?" But I saw the cost of it. He could not have these people watch what came next, because he did not yet know what came next, and a man like Dorian cannot bear to improvise in front of an audience. The partners filed out. Caspian lingered at the door, phone still in his hand, until Dorian said his name once, sharply, and he went. The heavy door sealed with a soft pneumatic sigh, and then it was the two of us and a coastline of gray water through the glass. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "What do you want?" Dorian said finally. Not a question. A negotiation opening, stripped of the warmth he wore for the others. "I want you to understand the position you're in," I said, "because you don't yet. You think this is about Brindlestack. It isn't. Brindlestack is just the first thing you can't do without me. Let me walk you through the rest." I had not raised my voice once that morning, and I did not raise it now. I have found that the quieter you are, the louder the room gets in a person's own head. "The unanimous consent clause doesn't just cover this exit," I said. "It covers every exit over 50 million for the life of this fund. We have 3 more positions maturing in the next 18 months. Valine, the payments company, the Aldermore stake, and the Corvo secondary you've already promised to 2 of our biggest LPs. All 3 clear the threshold. All 3 need my written consent. You have just voted to remove the one person whose signature every one of your marquee exits requires." His thumb pressed the table again. "And here is the part you really need to hear, Dorian. I read the LPA again last night, the way I read it every quarter, because I am the leftover furniture who actually does the reading. I let that sit. There is a provision your committee restructuring triggered without anyone noticing. Section 11. When a founding partner is stripped of committee authority through an internal action they did not consent to, the remaining founding partners' consent rights don't shrink, they expand. The clause was designed to prevent exactly the maneuver you just performed, a power grab dressed up as modernization. You didn't reduce my authority this morning. You concentrated it." "That's not," he started. "Call your own lawyers," I said. "Not the deal counsel. The ones who advise the management company. Ask them what the fund looks like on Monday if I walk out that door without signing anything. Ask them what happens to 94 million in committed exit proceeds, to your relationships with the limited partners who are expecting those distributions, to the fundraising you've been quietly doing for Fund 3 on the strength of a track record you can no longer realize without me." The color was leaving his face in stages, the way it does in men who have spent a lifetime being told they are the smartest person in every room and have just this once found themselves wrong in a way that cannot be charmed. He tried anyway. They always do. "Lyssandra, listen to me. This was never personal. The committee thing, that was Caspian's framing. You know how he is, all sharp edges. I value you. I have always valued you. We can put your seat back. We can announce it was a procedural error. Nobody outside this room needs to know it ever happened." His voice found its old warmth, and it was almost worse than the cruelty had been. "We're partners. We built this together." "We didn't," I said gently. "I built the part that lasts. You built the part that photographs well. For 18 months, you've been mistaking one for the other. What do you want?" he said again, and this time it cracked. "I want what the document already gives me," I said, "which is everything. So here is what's going to happen, and you're going to agree to it, because the alternative is that I sign nothing, the exit stall, the LPs panic, Fund 3 collapses on the launch pad, and you spend the next 2 years explaining to people who trusted you why the fund froze. You don't survive that, Dorian. Decisive men never survive being the reason nothing moved." I slid a second sheet of paper across the table. I had drafted it the night before, alone in my apartment, with the lights low and the city spread out beneath me. I had always known this morning was coming. I had simply let them choose the date. "You'll resign as managing partner, effective at the next LP meeting. Health reasons, family reasons, whatever lets you keep your face. I'll be confirmed as managing partner by the partnership, and yes, I have the votes now, because every person who filed out of this room just watched you discover you were never actually in charge. Caspian leaves. Brindlestack closes only if I decide it should, on terms that actually serve the LPs, and the founding governance returns to what Aurelio and I wrote it to be." He stared at the page. $94 million of exit proceeds, 3 more deals behind it, an entire fund's worth of credibility, all of it resting on a single signature he had spent 18 months trying to make irrelevant. "You planned this," he whispered. "No," I said, and I meant it. "I prepared for it. There's a difference. You planned. I just made sure that when you did, the document would be ready." I stood, smoothed my blazer, and folded the first page, the soft, creased one, back into the pocket over my heart. "Take the weekend," I said. "Read the agreement. The whole thing this time. I'll need your answer Monday." He read it over the weekend. I know because his lawyers called mine on Sunday afternoon, and the questions they asked were the questions of men confirming a defeat rather than contesting one. By Monday morning, there was nothing left to negotiate except the wording of the announcement. Dorian resigned at the next limited partners meeting, 3 weeks later, in a ballroom with the same coastal view he loved. He stood at the podium and spoke about legacy and renewal and the right time to pass the torch, and he did it beautifully, because performing was the one thing he had always been able to do without me. Most of the LPs believed it was his choice. A few of the older ones, the ones who had known Aurelio, who remembered who actually drafted the documents that protected their money, caught my eye across the room and gave me the smallest nods. They knew. People who do the reading always recognize each other. Caspian did not get a ballroom. He was gone within the week, quietly, his access revoked on a Tuesday afternoon while he was at lunch. I heard he told people he'd left for a more dynamic platform. I did not correct the story. There is no profit in stepping on a man who is already busy explaining himself. I was confirmed as managing partner of Castellane Verge by unanimous vote, which I found almost funny, given everything. Idris seconded the motion. He came to my office afterward, stood in the doorway, and said, "I should have raised my hand the other way." I told him the truth, that the vote had never mattered, that the document had already decided it. But I noticed he started forwarding me deal memos again, and I let him, because a person who admits a mistake out loud is worth keeping. Brindlestack did not close that Friday. I let the soft deal die and waited. 8 months later, the better exit arrived exactly as I had known it would. and our limited partners received a distribution that made the original 94 million look like the trap it always was. Nobody photographed the analysis that saved them. That has never bothered me. The footnotes don't ask for credit. They just hold the building up. I kept Dorian's office empty for a month before I moved into it. Not out of sentiment. I wanted to walk past it every day and remember the cost of being underestimated and the strange gift of it, too, because they only said those things in front of me because they were certain I didn't matter. Their certainty was my cover. A person no one is watching can build anything. On my first morning in that office, I unfolded the soft, creased page one last time and read Section 4 aloud to an empty room. The way I'd read it to the lawyers 9 years before, the way I'd read it to 8 partners who hadn't bothered to learn what they were signing. Then I framed it and hung it on the wall behind my desk, where every future partner who comes to ask me for something will have to sit beneath it. They called me leftover furniture. They were almost right. I was the load-bearing kind.